No, seriously. At some point, every reasonable person reaches a moment where they stop scrolling, stop nodding along, and quietly ask themselves an uncomfortable question. How many coincidences can stack up before coincidence stops feeling accidental? Because what people are reacting to right now isn't a single awkward clip taken out of context. It's not one strange headline or one family disagreement blown out of proportion. It's something slower, heavier, and harder to dismiss. It's a pattern, and patterns don't announce themselves loudly. They reveal themselves when someone finally says, "Just look at the timeline." For years, Meghan Markle's public narrative has been presented like a premium brand campaign, everything carefully framed, lighting just right, angles controlled, messaging polished, emotionally charged interviews placed at exactly the right moment. Any criticism, no matter how mild, was immediately reframed as cruelty, jealousy, or obsession. And if you dared to ask even the smallest question, you weren't told the answer. You were told there was something wrong with you for asking. But here's the thing audiences eventually notice. Truth doesn't usually need this level of protection. Reality doesn't require armies of defenders, endless reframing, or emotional pressure to keep people quiet. When something is solid, it stands up on its own. When it isn't, it needs constant reinforcement. What shifted recently wasn't tabloids, it wasn't YouTubers chasing clicks, it wasn't anonymous palace leaks. The shift happened when someone from within the family space encouraged people to do something remarkably simple, not to believe accusations, not to take sides, just to apply basic logic, to line things up chronologically and see if the story flows naturally from beginning to end. That suggestion alone changed the conversation, because once you remove emotion, loyalty, and branding from the equation, you're left with timelines, and timelines don't care about public image. One topic that resurfaced during these discussions was the possibility of serious medical procedures earlier in life, not presented as proven fact, not presented as confirmed truth, but as a medical scenario that, if true, would make later narratives difficult to reconcile. And that's where things stopped being about opinion, because once medicine enters the conversation, emotion stops being relevant. Biology doesn't negotiate, it doesn't bend for storytelling, it doesn't adapt to public relations. Let's slow this down for a moment. Certain medical procedures are not cosmetic, they are not temporary, they are not something you simply recover from with good messaging. They permanently change what the body can and cannot do. That's not judgment, that's anatomy. And this is why the focus keeps returning to timelines rather than personalities. Because if something fundamental occurred earlier, then later events must logically align with that reality. When people began revisiting timelines, some details felt unusual to them. Again, not accusations, observations, public appearances that didn't follow familiar physical progressions, moments that felt heavily staged, visual details that seemed inconsistent from one appearance to the next. At the time, these things were noticed quietly. People whispered, and then they were shut down, told they were being cruel, told they were invading privacy. But privacy and contradiction are not the same thing. Wanting space is understandable. Wanting silence while presenting a public narrative invites scrutiny. Children were announced publicly, discussed selectively, photographed sparingly, and rarely seen. Birth details were minimal, hospital confirmations were vague, medical staff were invisible. Long-standing traditions followed by generations suddenly disappeared without explanation, and whenever anyone asked why, the response was always the same: they're doing things differently. Different, however, doesn't mean illogical, and that's where public curiosity grew. Eventually, discussions around surrogacy entered the conversation, and it's important to say this clearly and responsibly. Surrogacy itself is not shameful, it is not immoral, it is not controversial in most societies. Millions of families rely on it and speak about it openly. The issue people are reacting to isn't surrogacy, it's secrecy within an institution that has always operated on documented legitimacy. This wasn't a private individual living quietly away from public systems. This was a senior royal figure within one of the most rule-driven institutions in the world. Royal lineage isn't symbolic, it's legal. Succession rules are rigid for a reason. They exist to prevent ambiguity. If alternative paths to parenthood are used, they are traditionally declared, documented, and acknowledged, not out of cruelty, but out of structural necessity. This is where comparison becomes unavoidable. Look at William and Catherine. Whether you admire them or not, their public story follows a consistent rhythm. Hospital steps, medical staff present, clear documentation, no mystery, no theatrics, no disappearing acts. Meghan and Harry's public story followed a very different pattern, and the contrast amplified questions rather than silencing them. As these conversations spread, a new claim appeared online from a woman alleging involvement as a surrogate. Now, pause here. This is an allegation circulating in public discourse, not a proven legal fact, but people paid attention because of how the claim was presented. It wasn't vague, it wasn't emotional, it was detailed. Dates, processes, descriptions, the kind of specificity that naturally draws scrutiny rather than dismissal. According to her public statements, she described carrying pregnancies while public appearances presented a different narrative. She spoke about contracts emphasizing secrecy, agreements designed around silence, NDAs framed not as protection but as erasure. Again, these are claims, not confirmations, but they offered an explanation that some viewers felt connected dots they had already noticed. She described two parallel timelines, one carefully curated for the public, fashion, interviews, appearances, and another hidden behind clinic doors, appointments, treatments, physical strain experienced privately. According to her account, these timelines allegedly aligned with public announcements in ways that felt unsettlingly precise. People began revisiting footage with new context. Moments once dismissed as fabric issues or camera angles were re-examined, not as proof, but as part of a larger pattern. Context changes interpretation. Once performance becomes a possibility, choreography becomes noticeable. Then there's the birth narrative itself, or rather the lack of visible narrative. No hospital steps, no medical staff, no traditional photo call. Instead, vague announcements delivered in unusual settings. At the time, this was framed as privacy. Now, many viewers interpret it as strategy. Here's a difficult reality. A pregnancy can be hidden. Labor cannot. Labor leaves records, timelines, medical professionals, witnesses. Every previous royal birth followed that structure. This one didn't. And when you introduce alternative explanations, the silence stops looking accidental. Public reaction shifted not because people hate anyone involved, but because people dislike feeling managed. The same voices that demanded transparency from the monarchy suddenly insisted on total silence when questions applied closer to home. That double standard fuels skepticism. Meanwhile, William and Catherine continue without spectacle. No dramatic narrative resets, no public contradictions, just consistency. You don't have to idolize them to recognize stability when you see it. At its core, this story isn't about cruelty. It's about credibility, about whether public figures can demand unquestioned belief while dismissing logical questions as malice, about whether branding can override biology, about whether institutions can be criticized for rigidity only until those rules become inconvenient. The broader implication matters. Influence built on curated mystery collapses under scrutiny. Power without transparency breeds distrust. Relevance sustained through silence eventually expires. You can only tell people to stop asking questions for so long before they ask louder ones. Even skeptics admit something feels unresolved, not proven, not confirmed, but unanswered. And unanswered stories don't fade, they grow, especially when responses rely on attack rather than explanation. So here we are, with a timeline that doesn't fully settle, claims that refuse to disappear, silence that feels engineered, and an audience increasingly unwilling to be told what not to notice. You don't have to choose a side. You just have to admit the questions exist, and once they exist, pretending they don't is the fastest way to lose trust. Now I want to hear from you. Do you see this as coincidence stacked on coincidence, or do you think something fundamental remains unaddressed? If you're watching from the UK or Australia, tell me how this story feels from your side of the world, because perspective matters. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like if you believe honest questions deserve honest discussion, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, because stories like this don't usually end quietly. They unravel.